The stars twisted and bent as 12 massive warships tore through the fabric of space itself. Behind them came a 13th vessel, larger than all the others combined. Its hull was made of gold-colored metal that seemed to glow with its own light. The name of this ship was the Throne of Compliance, and it had visited over 200 worlds in the past 3 centuries. Every single one of those worlds now belonged to the Vethkai Dominion. Ambassador Cathoris stood at the viewing window of the golden ship and watched as a small blue planet grew larger in the distance. Earth, home to a species called humans. He had studied their file for weeks during the journey. Everything he learned made him more confident about this mission. The humans were young. They had only discovered how to travel through space about 200 years ago. They had no way to move faster than light. Their colonies existed only within their own solar system. They fought among themselves constantly. They had nearly destroyed their own planet through pollution and war. Cathoris made a sound that his species used for laughter. This would be easy. The Vethkai Dominion had perfected the art of expansion over 300 years. They never called themselves conquerors because they never needed to fire a single weapon. Their method was simple and effective. They would arrive at a new world with overwhelming military force. They would present terms that seemed generous on the surface. "Join us," they would say. "Become part of our great civilization. We will protect you from the dangers of the galaxy. We will share our technology with you. All you need to do is accept our guidance." The unspoken part of the offer was always clear. Accept or be destroyed. No species had ever chosen destruction. Why would they? The Dominion offered safety and advancement. The only cost was freedom, and most species decided that freedom was not worth dying for. Cathoris expected the humans to be no different. His assistant entered the viewing room and bowed low. The assistant was a young officer named Vessel, and his 4 eyes were wide with confusion. "Ambassador, we have received a response from the humans already." Cathoris turned from the window. Most species took days to respond to the Dominion's arrival. Some panicked and sent desperate messages, begging for mercy. Others tried to sound brave while their voices trembled with fear. What do they say? They say, Vessel looked at the message again, as if he could not believe what he was reading. They say they acknowledge our arrival. They have provided coordinates for a meeting location. They say they look forward to productive discussions. Cathoris waited for more, but his assistant had nothing else to report. That was the entire message. No fear, no panic, no desperate questions about the fleet's intentions. Just a calm acknowledgement and an invitation to talk. Interesting, the ambassador said quietly. He told himself that this meant nothing. Perhaps the humans were simply too primitive to understand the danger they faced. Perhaps they were putting on a brave face to hide their terror. Perhaps they were just strange creatures who did not react the way normal species did. Still, something about that message bothered him. There was a confidence in those words that did not match what he knew about humanity. A species on the edge of conquest should not sound so calm. The fleet continued its approach toward Earth. As they drew closer, the sensor officers began mapping everything in the solar system. They found human colonies on Mars and several moons. They found mining operations in the asteroid belt. They found thousands of satellites orbiting Earth and strange structures floating in the darkness between planets.
What are those?
Cathoris asked, pointing to the structures. Communication relays, his tactical officer replied. And mining equipment. Nothing of military value. Their weapons technology is primitive. Chemical rockets. Nuclear warheads. Directed energy weapons that could barely scratch our shields. The ambassador nodded, satisfied. Everything matched the intelligence reports. The humans were exactly what they appeared to be. A young civilization with no real power. It's about to learn their place in the galaxy. But as the hours passed and the fleet moved deeper into the solar system, Cathoris noticed something that made his scales itch with discomfort. The humans were not running. Their ships continued their normal routes. Their communications showed no signs of panic. Their military vessels, few as they were, had not even moved to intercept the Dominion fleet. It was as if the humans did not care that 12 warships and 1 diplomatic cruiser had entered their home. "They are fools," his tactical officer said. "They do not understand what they face." "Perhaps," Cathoras replied. But he was not so sure anymore. The meeting was scheduled to take place aboard the Throne of Compliance. This was standard procedure. The Dominion always negotiated on their own territory, in a room designed to remind visitors of their inferior position. The walls displayed holographic images of worlds that had accepted Dominion rule. The ceiling stretched so high that most species felt small just standing beneath it. The chairs for guests were deliberately uncomfortable. Every detail was meant to send a message. You are weak. We are strong. Accept this truth, and everything will be easier. The human shuttle arrived exactly on time. It was a small vessel, barely large enough to hold a dozen passengers. It looked fragile next to the massive Dominion warships. The ambassador watched through a security feed as the shuttle docked with his ship. 5 humans emerged. They wore simple gray uniforms with no decorations or symbols of rank. Their leader was a woman with black hair and dark eyes. Her face showed no expression as she walked through the corridors of the Throne of Compliance. She did not look up at the towering ceilings. She did not pause to stare at the displays of conquered worlds. She walked like someone who had seen all of this before and was not impressed. Her name, according to the briefing, was Director Yuki. Tanaka Cathoras watched her approach the negotiation chamber and felt the itch beneath his scales grow stronger. He had done this hundreds of times. He had faced warriors and kings and desperate leaders who thought they could change their fate with clever words. He knew how to read body language across dozens of species. Director Tanaka was not afraid. She was not pretending to be brave. She was not hiding her emotions behind a mask of calm. She was simply not afraid. The ambassador pushed away his doubts. It did not matter how the humans felt. It did not matter if they understood the situation or not. The Dominion had the power. The Dominion had the ships. The Dominion had 3 centuries of experience crushing any species that dared to resist. Whatever game the humans thought they were playing, they were about to lose. Cathoras adjusted his ceremonial robes, composed his features into an expression of benevolent authority, and walked into the negotiation chamber to meet the representatives of Earth. He had no idea that he was walking into a trap that had been prepared for over a century. He had no idea that everything he believed about humanity was wrong, and he had no idea that by the end of this meeting, his entire understanding of the galaxy would be turned upside down. Humans were not afraid because they had no reason to be. Afraid the Dominion just did not know it yet. Negotiation chamber aboard the Throne of Compliance was designed to make visitors feel small. The ceiling rose 50 meters above the floor, covered in lights that looked like distant stars. The walls displayed slowly rotating images of planets, each one labeled with the date it had joined the Dominion. 237 worlds. 237 civilizations that had accepted their place beneath the Beth. Cat Ambassador Cathoras sat at the head of a long table made from dark stone. Behind him stood 12 of his finest officers, each one a veteran of dozens of diplomatic missions. They wore their ceremonial armor, decorated with symbols representing every world they had helped bring into the fold. The message was clear. We have done this many times. We have never failed. The 5 humans sat at the opposite end of the table. They had been given chairs that were too low and too hard. The lighting above them was slightly too bright, meant to make them squint and sweat. These were old tricks, but they worked on most species. The humans did not seem to notice. They sat comfortably, their eyes adjusting to the light without difficulty. Director Tanaka had placed a small bag on the table beside her, but otherwise they had brought nothing. "Welcome to the Throne of Compliance," Cathoras began. His voice was warm and friendly. This was part of the technique. Be kind, be generous. Make them feel that you are their friend even as you take everything from them. I am Ambassador Cathoras, voice of the Dominion in matters of expansion. I trust your journey was comfortable? It was fine, Director Tanaka replied. Her voice was calm and level. Thank you for receiving us. Of course. The Dominion always welcomes new friends. Cathoras spread his forearms in a gesture of openness. Let me begin by saying that this is a momentous occasion. Your species stands at a crossroads. The path you choose today will determine the future of your civilization for generations to come. He paused for effect. Most species leaned forward at this point, desperate to hear what came next. The humans simply waited. Cathoras continued. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There are powers out there that would see your kind destroyed or enslaved. The Dominion has spent 3 centuries building a shield against these dangers. We offer protection. We offer technology. We offer a place within a community of worlds that spans 1,000 star systems. He touched a control on the table, and the walls shifted to show images of Dominion achievements. Great cities on alien worlds. Starships traveling through portals of light. Medical technology that could cure any disease. Agricultural systems that could feed billions. All of this can be yours, the ambassador said. All we ask in return is that you accept our guidance. Become a protectorate of the Dominion. Allow us to manage your relations with other species. Allow us to help modernize your military and your economy. In exchange, you will have access to everything you have seen here and more. He smiled, showing rows of small teeth. I know this is a lot to consider, but I must be honest with you. This offer is not optional. The Dominion fleet in your orbit represents only a small fraction of our military power. If you refuse our friendship, we will be forced to take more direct action. No one wants that. I certainly do not want that. But the Dominion must expand. It is our nature. It is our purpose. Cathoras leaned back in his chair, satisfied with his performance. He had delivered this speech many times, and it always worked. The combination of reward and threat was perfectly balanced. Accept and prosper. Refuse and die. Most species agreed before he even finished speaking. Director Tanaka was silent for a long moment. Then she tilted her head slightly to one side. May I ask you a question, Ambassador? Of course. I encourage open dialogue. In your 300 years of expansion, has any species ever refused your offer? The question was simple, but something about the way she asked it made Cathoras uncomfortable. His officers shifted behind him. Some have initially hesitated, he admitted. They learned the consequences of that hesitation. I see. Tanaka nodded slowly. So every species you have encountered has either accepted your terms or been destroyed. That is an oversimplification. The Dominion does not destroy civilizations. We simply help them understand that cooperation is in their best interest. Right? The human woman showed no expression. And because of this history, you have come to believe something very fundamental. You believe that you will always enter negotiations from a position of strength. You believe that the species you contact will always be weaker than you. Your entire diplomatic strategy is built on this assumption. Cathoras felt his scales tightening. It is not an assumption. It is reality. The Dominion is the most powerful force in this region of the galaxy. No species has ever matched our military capability. No species ever will. What if you're wrong? The words hung in the air. Behind Cathoras, one of his officers made a sound of disbelief. Another laughed nervously. I am not wrong, the ambassador said firmly. We have scanned your entire solar system. We know exactly what weapons you possess. Your largest warship could not scratch the paint on the smallest vessel in my fleet. Director Tanaka reached into the bag beside her and removed a small device. It was no bigger than her hand, made of black metal with a single button on its surface. You know what weapons we have shown you? She said. You know what we have allowed you to see? She pressed the button. A hologram appeared above the center of the table. It showed the solar system in perfect detail. Earth, Mars, the asteroid belt, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and scattered throughout all of it, thousands of small red dots that had not appeared on any Dominion scan. For the past 150 years, Director Tanaka said, humanity has known that we were not alone in the universe. We intercepted your communications. We studied your expansion. We watched you absorb civilization after civilization. And we understood something very clearly. She stood up from her chair, and somehow the room felt different. The high ceiling and glowing walls no longer seemed impressive. They seemed small. We understood that when you finally came for us, you would not come as friends. You would come exactly as you have come today, with ships and threats and a smile that hides a knife, so we prepared. The hologram zoomed in on one of the red dots. It was a structure hidden inside an asteroid, invisible to external scans. The display showed its interior: power generators, targeting systems, and weapons. Weapons that made the ambassador's blood run cold. Every red dot you see is a weapons platform, Tanaka continued. Relativistic kinetic impactors, directed energy arrays, nuclear-pumped lasers, antimatter warheads. We have been building them in secret for over a century. We have been hiding them in asteroids and moons and the dark spaces between planets. We have been waiting. Cathoris could not speak. His mind was trying to process what he was seeing, but it did not make sense. The humans were primitive. The humans were weak. The humans were supposed to be easy. Right now, Director Tanaka said, every ship in your fleet has over 100 weapons locked onto it. Your shields are impressive, but they cannot stop a projectile moving at 30% of light speed. Your point defense systems are fast, but they cannot track 1,000 incoming targets at once. If I give the order, your fleet will be destroyed in less than 60 seconds. She sat back down and folded her hands on the table. But I'm not going to give that order. Not yet. Because unlike the Dominion, humanity does not believe that strength must be used for domination. We built these weapons to defend ourselves. We hoped we would never have to use them. She looked directly into the ambassador's eyes. You came here to negotiate from strength. You assumed you were the strong ones. You were wrong. Now the question is simple. Do you want to continue this conversation as equals? Or do you want to find out what happens when you push humanity too far? The chamber was completely silent. For the first time in 300 years, the Dominion had encountered something they did not know how to handle. A species that was not afraid. A species that had been ready for them all along, and Ambassador Ketharos realized, with a growing sense of dread, that everything he thought he knew about this mission was about to change. The hologram floating above the negotiation table told a story that Ambassador Ketharos could barely comprehend. Thousands of weapons platforms scattered throughout the human solar system. Hidden bases on moons and asteroids. The entire fleets of ships that had never appeared on any Dominion scan. It was impossible. It should have been impossible. How? He whispered. The word escaped his mouth before he could stop it. How did you hide all of this? Director Tanaka leaned back in her chair. For the first time since the negotiation began, something like warmth entered her voice. She was not gloating. She was not threatening. She was simply explaining. Let me tell you a story, Ambassador. 153 years ago, a radio telescope in South America detected something strange. A signal from deep space. It was clearly artificial. It was clearly not human. For 3 days, a small group of scientists celebrated in secret. They thought they had discovered proof that humanity was not alone. They thought this was the greatest moment in human history. She paused. They were wrong. The hologram shifted. It showed waves of data, translated into visual form. Communications between Dominion ships. Reports about conquered worlds. Strategic discussions about future expansion. The signal was not a greeting. It was leaked military communication from your empire. Once our scientists understood what they were looking at, their celebration turned to horror. They learned about the Dominion. They learned about the hegemony of Seer. They learned about the Keth Collective and a dozen other powers. And they learned one thing above all else. Tanaka's eyes met the ambassador's. The galaxy is not a friendly place. Every major civilization we could identify operated the same way. The strong dominated the weak. Species were absorbed or destroyed. There was no United Nations of space. There was no galactic community of equals. There was only power, and those who had it, and those who did not. Ketharos wanted to argue, but he could not. She was describing his own civilization. She was describing the fundamental truth of galactic politics. Our leaders faced a choice, Tanaka continued. They could reveal this information to the public and cause worldwide panic. They could try to make contact with alien powers and hope for the best. Or they could do something that humanity had never done before. The hologram changed again. It showed Earth from space, then zoomed out to show the entire solar system. They chose to prepare, in secret, as one species. What followed was the most remarkable story Cthulhu had ever heard. For 150 years, humanity had maintained two faces. The public face was familiar. Nations competed with each other. Corporations fought for market share. Politicians argued about budgets and borders. Wars were fought. Peace was made. Life went on as normal, but behind this public face, something else was happening. A shadow organization had been created, funded by every major government on Earth. Its purpose was simple: make humanity ready for the day when the aliens arrived. We called it the Quiet Preparation, Tanaka said. The greatest secret in human history. Presidents and prime ministers came and went, but the preparation continued. Scientists from rival nations worked together in hidden laboratories. Resources flowed across borders through channels that no public official ever saw. We built everything you see in this hologram, piece by piece, year by year. The display showed the construction of weapons platforms hidden inside asteroids. It showed mining ships that were actually warships in disguise. It showed communication relays that could transform into orbital defense stations in less than a minute. Your scouts have been watching our system for decades, Tanaka said. They saw exactly what we wanted them to see. A young civilization, divided, primitive, easy prey. They never suspected that every satellite, every space station, every ship we launched had a secondary purpose. Cthulhu thought about the sensor reports he had reviewed during the journey. The communication relays, the mining equipment, the primitive human fleet that could barely reach the outer planets. All of it was a lie. All of it was camouflage. The technology, he said slowly. Some of what you're showing me is beyond anything we believed you possessed. The relativistic weapons, the shield generators. How did you develop these things without our knowledge? Tanaka smiled slightly. 50 years ago, one of your scout ships crashed on a moon of Jupiter. Your people assumed it was destroyed. They were wrong. We recovered it. We spent 30 years taking it apart, piece by piece, and learning everything we could. Your own technology helped us build the weapons that are now pointed at your fleet. The irony was not lost on Cthulhu. The Dominion's arrogance had given humanity exactly what they needed to defend themselves. But why hide it? He asked. If you had this power, why not announce it? Why not warn us away before we even entered your system? Because we understand something your Dominion does not, Tanaka replied. The greatest strength is the strength your enemy does not know about. If we had revealed our weapons decades ago, you would have returned with a larger fleet. You would have studied our defenses and found ways around them. By staying silent, we forced you to come to us blind. We let you walk into the heart of our territory, surrounded by weapons you did not know existed. She gestured at the walls of the negotiation chamber. At the images of conquered worlds, you built this room to intimidate us. You wanted us to feel small. But Ambassador, look around you. Your fleet is in the center of a kill zone. Every ship you brought is targeted by weapons that your shields cannot stop. We could have destroyed you the moment you arrived. We chose not to. Cthulhu felt something he had not felt in over a century of diplomatic work. He felt afraid. Not of the weapons. Not of death. But of the mind behind those weapons. The patience. The planning. The absolute control. You let us come here, he said. You let us make our threats. You sat through my speech about protection and guidance. And the entire time, you knew you could kill us all. Yes. Why? Why not simply destroy us and be done with it? Director Tanaka stood up from the table and walked toward the holographic display. She reached out and touched one of the red dots, a weapons platform hidden in the asteroid belt. Because we could have become you, she said quietly. We could have built our weapons and used them to conquer. We could have created our own empire of fear. Some of our leaders wanted exactly that. They said it was the only way to survive in a hostile galaxy. She turned to face the ambassador. But humanity is strange, Ambassador. We have spent thousands of years fighting among ourselves, hurting each other, making terrible mistakes. And through all of that, we have kept alive a simple dream. A dream that things can be better. That strength does not have to mean domination. That different peoples can work together instead of trying to destroy each other. The room was silent. Even the Dominion officers behind Cathoris had stopped moving. We built these weapons to defend that dream, Tanaka said, not to abandon it. We could have attacked you. We could have hidden and hoped you would leave. Instead, we are standing here in this room, offering you something that no species has ever offered the Dominion before. She walked back to the table and placed her hands flat on its surface. A real negotiation. Between equals, not based on fear, not based on threats. Based on the possibility that two civilizations can find a better way. Cathoris stared at her for a long moment. His mind was spinning. Everything he had been taught about diplomacy, about power, about the natural order of the galaxy was being challenged. And the strangest part was that he wanted to believe her. And if we refuse? He asked. If we choose to fight despite the odds? Tanaka's expression did not change. Then we will defend ourselves. And millions will die. Your people. Our people. And the dream dies with them. She sat down and folded her hands. So, Ambassador, what is your answer? Ambassador Catharis did not answer immediately. He could not. For the first time in his long career, words had abandoned him. He sat in his chair designed to make him look powerful and commanding, and felt like a child who had been caught in a lie. The 12 officers behind him were equally silent. They had entered this room expecting an easy victory. They had expected the humans to beg or bargain or make pathetic attempts at resistance. They had not expected this. No one in the history of the Dominion had ever expected this. Outside the negotiation chamber, the situation was even worse. The tactical officers aboard the Dominion warships had finally completed their full analysis of human space. What they found made their blood freeze in their veins. On the bridge of the lead warship, Commander Vethril stared at his display screen in disbelief. 32,000 discrete weapons platforms had just activated their targeting systems. Every ship in the fleet was marked by hundreds of red lines, each one representing a weapon capable of punching through their strongest shields. The humans had not been lying. They had not been bluffing. The Dominion fleet was surrounded by death, and they had sailed into it willingly.
Ambassador?
Vethril's voice crackled through the communication system into the negotiation chamber. Ambassador, you need to see this. The entire system is armed. We are completely surrounded. Ketharus heard the panic in his commander's voice. He had never heard Vethril sound afraid before. The commander had fought in 3 wars and overseen the absorption of 47 worlds. Now he sounded like a frightened child. I know, Cathoris, replied quietly. The humans have shown me we need to withdraw. We need to jump to hyperspace immediately. Director Tanaka spoke up. I should mention that your hyperdrives require approximately 40 seconds to activate. Our closest weapons platforms can reach your ships in less than 3. If you try to run, you will die. The communication line went silent. Cathoris could imagine Vethril's face, the way his scales would be turning pale with fear. The commander was realizing what the ambassador had already understood. They were trapped. The Dominion, which had never lost a diplomatic engagement, was completely at the mercy of a species they had dismissed as primitive. You planned this perfectly, Cathoris said. His voice was hollow. You knew exactly when to reveal your power. Not too early, or we would have stayed outside your range. Not too late, or we might have done something foolish. You waited until we were in the heart of your territory, comfortable and confident before showing us the truth. Yes, Tanaka admitted. We have been preparing for this conversation for over a century. We practiced different scenarios. We calculated response times. We made sure that when you finally understood your position, you would have no option except to listen. And what do you want us to hear? Tanaka leaned forward. Her eyes met his, and there was no hatred in them. No anger, no triumph. Just a strange kind of hope. I want you to hear that this is not what we wanted. We did not want to build these weapons. We did not want to spend 150 years preparing for war. We wanted to reach out to the stars and find friends. We wanted to learn from older civilizations and share our own discoveries. We wanted the galaxy to be the wonderful place we dreamed about when we first looked up at the night sky. She paused, and something like sadness crossed her face. But we looked at the evidence, and we saw what the galaxy really was. We saw empires built on fear. We saw civilizations crushed because they were not strong enough to resist. We saw that kindness was treated as weakness, and weakness was punished with extinction. So we did what we had to do. We became strong enough that no one could take our choices away from us. Kethoros listened, and something unexpected began to stir in his chest. It was not fear, though fear was certainly present. It was something older, something he had buried long ago, in the early days of his career, when he still believed the Dominion was a force for good. You could have become like us, he said slowly. With this power, you could have started your own empire. You could have conquered weaker species and grown your territory. Why didn't you? Tanaka smiled, but it was a sad smile, because we know what that path leads to. We have seen it in our own history. We have built empires before. We have conquered and enslaved and destroyed. And every time we eventually realized that we had lost something precious, something that all the power in the galaxy could not replace. Ourselves. Our humanity. The thing that makes us who we are. She stood up and walked to the wall of the chamber, where the images of Dominion worlds rotated slowly. She pointed at one of them, a green planet covered in vast cities. Tell me about this world, Ambassador. Who lived here before the Dominion came? Catharis looked at the planet. Its name was Varnus, and it had been absorbed into the Dominion over 200 years ago. They were called the Var, a peaceful species. Artists and philosophers, they accepted our terms. Without resistance? And what happened to their art? Their philosophy? Their unique way of seeing the universe? The ambassador was silent. He knew the answer. The VAR had been integrated into Dominion society. Their children learned Dominion history in Dominion schools. Their artists created works that celebrated Dominion achievements. Within 3 generations, there was nothing left of what the VAR had been. They had not been destroyed. They had simply been absorbed until they disappeared. That is what you call protection, Tanaka said softly. That is what you call friendship. You do not kill civilizations with weapons. You kill them with kindness. You erase everything that makes them special and replace it with yourself. She turned back to face him. We do not want to be erased, Ambassador. We do not want to become a pale copy of the Dominion. We want to remain human, with all our flaws and all our dreams. And we are willing to fight for that right. The words hit Cathoras like physical blows. He had spent his entire career telling himself that the Dominion was doing good work. They were bringing order to chaos. They were protecting weaker species from danger. They were building a better galaxy. But Tanaka was right. The Dominion did not protect cultures. It consumed them. It turned diverse, unique civilizations into copies of itself. And it called this process liberation. I used to believe in what we did, he said quietly. The officers behind him stirred uncomfortably. When I was young, I truly believed the Dominion was making the galaxy better. But somewhere along the way, I stopped believing. I stopped thinking about what we were doing. I just did my job and collected my honors and pretended. Everything was fine. He looked up at Tanaka. You are the first species to make me remember what we have become. The human woman walked back to the table and sat down across from him. Then help us find another way. You have the authority to negotiate on behalf of your fleet. You have the connections to communicate with your government. And you have something that most of your colleagues have lost. Is that a conscience? Cathoras looked at the human delegation. 5 people in simple gray uniforms, no weapons, no threats. Just 5 individuals who had chosen to walk into the heart of the enemy and offer peace. If I agree to negotiate, he said carefully, if I report to my government that humanity is not a species to be conquered, what makes you think they will listen? Tanaka reached into her bag and pulled out a small data crystal. She slid it across the table. This contains everything we know about your dominion. Every weakness in your supply lines. Every discontent among your subject species. Every secret your government has tried to hide from its own people. We have been watching you for a very long time, Ambassador. And we are not the only ones who want things to change. Cathoris picked up the crystal. It was small and light, but it felt like it weighed more than his entire fleet. If you share this information with your subject species, Tanaka said, it could start a revolution. The Dominion could collapse into chaos. Millions could die, and you would do that. You would start a war that might destroy half the galaxy? The human woman met his eyes. We would rather not. We would rather find a peaceful solution. But we will not become slaves. We will not be absorbed, and we will not sit quietly while the Dominion continues to consume everything in its path. She placed her hands flat on the table. The choice is yours, Ambassador. You can help us build something new, or you can watch everything burn. What will it be? Ambassador Cathoris held the data crystal in his hand and felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Everything he had believed in, everything he had worked for, everything he had told himself was right and good. All of it was being challenged by a species that should have been easy prey. He thought about the Var and their lost art. He thought about the dozens of other civilizations that had been absorbed into the Dominion, their unique voices silenced forever. He thought about the young officer he had been, so full of ideals, so certain that he was making a difference. That young officer had died slowly, placed by a diplomat who followed orders without questioning them. Now, the first time in over a century, Cathoris had a chance to choose. He could follow the old path. He could report to his superiors that the humans were too dangerous to confront directly. He could recommend a blockade, a siege, a long war of attrition. The Dominion might eventually win such a war, but the cost would be enormous. Millions would die on both sides, or he could choose a different path, one that no Dominion ambassador had ever taken before. I need to speak with my fleet commanders, he said finally, and I need to contact my government. What you are proposing is not something I can agree to alone. Director Tanaka nodded. We understand. Take the time you need. But remember that every moment your fleet remains in our space, you are at our mercy. We are choosing not to fire. We can choose differently. The next 3 days were the most difficult of Cathoris' life. He argued with his fleet commanders, wanted to retreat or fight or do anything except negotiate with a species that had humiliated them. He sent encrypted messages to the Dominion homeworld, trying to explain a situation that his superiors could barely comprehend. He sat through hours of debate, facing accusations of cowardice and treason and worse. But slowly, painfully, the truth began to sink in. The Dominion could not win this fight, not without paying a price that would weaken them for generations. And the data crystal that Tanaka had given him revealed an even more disturbing truth. Humanity was not alone in wanting change. Across Dominion space, subject species were watching, waiting, hoping. If the Dominion attacked Earth and lost, those watching species might finally find the courage to rebel. The Empire could face not one enemy, but dozens, hundreds. Everything the Vethkai had built over 3 centuries could collapse in a matter of years. On the morning of the 4th day, Cathoris returned to the negotiation chamber. His officers no longer stood behind him in their ceremonial armor. Instead, he came alone, wearing simple robes, without decoration. Director Tanaka was waiting for him. Her 4 companions sat in their usual places, their faces calm and patient. I have spoken with my government, Cathoris said. I have explained the situation as clearly as I could. I have told them what you have shown me and what you have offered. Tanaka waited. You do not believe me. They think I have been fooled or threatened or controlled. They have ordered me to demand your surrender or face the consequences. Something flickered across the human woman's face. Disappointment, perhaps. Or sadness. I see, she said quietly. Then we have nothing more to discuss. No. You misunderstand. Cathoris took a deep breath. I have received my orders. But I have also made a decision. For the first time in my career, I am going to disobey them." The room went still. "I was taught that the Dominion knows best," the ambassador continued. "I was taught that our way is the only way. I was taught that strength must be used to dominate, and that any other path leads to weakness and destruction. But you have shown me something different." He looked at Tanaka, and there was something new in his eyes. Something that looked almost like hope. "You could have destroyed us. You could have started a war. You could have used your power the same way the Dominion uses its power. Instead, you chose to talk. You chose to offer us a chance. You chose to believe that there might be a better way." He placed his hands on the negotiation table. "I want to believe it too. I want to believe that 300 years of conquest and absorption is not all my species is capable of. I want to believe that we can change." Director Tanaka studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. "That is all we ever wanted to hear, Ambassador." The negotiations that followed were unlike anything either species had experienced before. There were no threats, no power plays, no attempts to manipulate or deceive. For the first time in history, two civilizations sat down as equals and tried to build something together. They talked about trade, finding ways that both economies could benefit. They talked about technology, sharing knowledge without one side dominating the other. They talked about defense, agreeing to protect each other from genuine threats without using that protection as a tool for control. They talked about culture, about art, about the simple joy of learning how another species saw the universe. It was not easy. There were arguments and disagreements and moments when everything seemed about to fall apart. The Dominion homeworld sent angry messages demanding to know what Cathoris was doing. Human politicians questioned whether they could trust their ancient enemies. Fear and suspicion on both sides threatened to destroy everything they were building. But they kept talking. They kept trying. And slowly, painfully, trust began to grow. The document they produced was called the Soul Accord. It was not a surrender. It was not a compliance agreement. It was something that had never existed in galactic politics before. A genuine partnership between equals. Word of the accord spread quickly. The subject species of the Dominion heard what had happened at Earth. A young civilization had faced the Dominion fleet and had not bowed. They had negotiated as equals. They had won concessions that no species had ever won before. For many of these subject species, it was the first time they had dared to hope. If humanity could stand up to the Dominion, perhaps they could too. Not through war, not through violence, but through the same strange power the humans had demonstrated, the power of choice, the power of believing in something better. On the day the accord was signed, Ambassador Cathoris requested a private meeting with Director Tanaka. They met in a small room aboard the throne of compliance, far from the cameras and the officials and the weight of history. "You took an enormous risk," the ambassador said. "If we had chosen to fight, millions would have died on both sides. Your species might have survived, but the cost would have been terrible." Tanaka nodded. "We knew that. We debated it for years. In the end, we decided that the risk was worth taking." "Why? What could possibly be worth risking the lives of millions?" The human woman walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Earth hung in the distance, a small blue dot against the infinite darkness. "Because the alternative would have been worse," she said softly. "If we had attacked first, we would have become exactly what we were fighting against. If we had hidden and let you take us, we would have lost everything that made us who we are. The only option that let us stay human was to take the risk. To point every weapon we had at you and still offer peace." She turned to face him. "There is something in humanity that refuses to give up on hope. It is not logical. It is not always wise. It gets us into trouble as often as it saves us. But it is the best part of who we are, and we could not abandon it, even to save our own lives." Cathoris was silent for a long moment. Then he said something he had never said to anyone from another species. "Thank you." Tanaka looked surprised. "For what?" "For reminding me that there's another way. For showing me that strength does not have to mean domination. For giving me a chance to become something better than what I was He extended one of his four hands in the gesture of friendship that his species used. Do not know if the Dominion will accept the changes we have begun. I do not know if my government will follow the path of the Accord, but I know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to spread what I have learned here, not through force, not through threats, but through the simple truth that you have shown me. Director Tanaka took his hand. That is how change begins, she said. One person at a time. One choice at a time. One moment of courage at a time. In the years that followed, the Soul Accord would become the foundation for a new kind of galactic politics. It was not perfect. There were setbacks and failures and moments when war seemed inevitable. But each time, someone remembered what had happened at Earth. Someone remembered that two species on the edge of destruction had chosen to talk instead of fight, and whenever younger species asked how humanity had managed to change the course of galactic history, the answer was always the same. They pointed every weapon they had at the Dominion. They could have fired at any moment. They could have started a war that would have consumed both civilizations. Instead, they spoke. And in that moment, the galaxy began to change.